Captain Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars streak past as his ship moved through space. The year was 2387, and humanity had just learned to travel faster than light 12 years ago. Jake commanded one of Earth's best exploration ships, searching for new worlds where humans could build homes. His crew had been out here for 6 months, mapping star systems and checking planets for signs of life. The Liberty was heading back to Earth when something strange happened. The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Amy Davis, looked up from her station with worry in her eyes. She had picked up a signal that was not human. The transmission was powerful, coming from deep space, and it was clearly made by aliens. Jake ordered his crew to record everything and try to understand what the message meant. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the ship's science officer, worked for hours to decode the alien transmission. What she found made everyone on the bridge go quiet. The message was a warning sent to all nearby star systems. It told them that the Zephyrian Galactic Empire was coming, and any species that did not surrender would be destroyed. The transmission included images of massive alien ships and weapons that could crack planets in half. Jake immediately sent a priority message to Earth. Within hours, Admiral Lisa Parker received the information at Earth Defense Command. Lisa was a tough woman who had spent 30 years protecting humanity's growing empire of 12 worlds. She had fought pirates and dealt with dangerous asteroid storms, but nothing had prepared her for this. The aliens were not just powerful. They ruled over 10,000 star systems and had been crushing other species for thousands of years. President Kevin Stone called an emergency meeting of the Global Council. Leaders from every human world gathered. In the Great Hall on Earth, their faces grim as they watched the alien transmission. The message was clear and terrifying. High Chancellor Vex Tar of the Zephyrian Empire appeared as a hologram, his 4 arms spread wide and his scaled face showing no emotion. He spoke in perfect human language, which meant the aliens had been watching humanity for some time. The Chancellor's words were simple and cruel. Humanity had 30 Earth days to surrender completely. They must destroy all their military ships, give up their technology, and accept Zephyrian rule. Any human who refused would be killed, and any world that fought back would be turned to ash. The Empire saw humans as nothing more than smart animals who had learned to fly between stars. They were not worthy of freedom or independence. Dr. Rodriguez studied every part of the alien transmission, trying to learn about these Zephyrians. What she discovered made the situation even worse. The Empire had a strict system where different types of aliens had different jobs. The Zephyrians were at the top, ruling over everyone else. Below them were warrior species who fought their battles, worker species who built their ships, and slave species who did whatever the Empire commanded. Humans would become the lowest type of slaves if they surrendered. While the leaders on Earth argued about what to do, Captain Amy Chen was returning from a secret mission in her scout ship, the UES Valiant. Amy had been sent to watch the edge of human space for any signs of trouble. What she saw there made her push her ship to its limits, racing back to Earth with terrible news. The Zephyrian war fleet was already gathering just outside human territory. Amy counted over 50,000 ships, each one larger and more powerful than anything humans had ever built. The alien fleet was led by massive vessels that looked like floating cities. Their weapons could destroy entire fleets with single shots, and their shields could stop any attack humans might try. Amy's recordings showed that the Zephyrians were not bluffing. They had the power to wipe out humanity completely, and they were ready to use it. As the news spread across human space, panic began to set in. Some colonies wanted to surrender immediately, hoping that cooperation might save their lives. Others prepared to fight, even though they knew it was hopeless. Families said goodbye to each other, not knowing if they would ever meet again. Children asked their parents why the aliens wanted to hurt them, and the adults had no good answers. President Stone stood before the cameras, knowing that his next words would decide humanity's fate. Behind him, Admiral Parker was already making plans for war, while Dr. Rodriguez continued studying the aliens, looking for any weakness they might have. Captain Harrison brought the Liberty home as fast as possible, knowing that every human ship would be needed in the coming battle. The 30-day countdown had begun, and across human space, people looked up at the stars with new fear. Those same stars that had once promised adventure and new homes now hid an enemy that wanted to destroy everything humans had built. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered the galaxy by force, and now they were coming for Earth. Humanity's greatest test was about to begin, and no one knew if they would survive it. President Kevin Stone walked slowly to the podium in the Great Assembly Hall. Representatives from all 12 human worlds sat before him, their faces showing the fear and uncertainty that had gripped humanity since the alien ultimatum arrived. Behind Kevin stood Admiral Lisa Parker and the other military leaders, while scientists and diplomats filled the remaining seats. The weight of humanity's future rested on the words he was about to speak. Kevin looked out at the assembled leaders and took a deep breath. He spoke clearly and firmly, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall and to billions of humans, watching across the galaxy. He said that humanity would never kneel before tyrants, no matter how powerful they might be. The choice was simple: live free or die fighting. The Zephyrian Empire could take their ultimatum and their threats, because humans would rather face destruction than accept slavery. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some representatives jumped to their feet, cheering and shouting their support for resistance. Others sat in stunned silence, knowing that Kevin had just signed humanity's death warrant. The colony world of New Boston wanted to negotiate with the aliens, hoping to find some middle ground that might save lives. The mining colonies of the Outer Rim declared they would fight to the last person, their tough miners ready for war. Colonel Marcus Bell had been waiting for this moment. As soon as Kevin finished speaking, Marcus began the largest military mobilization in human history. Every ship that could fly was ordered to report for duty, from massive cargo haulers to tiny personal spacecraft. Civilian shipyards worked around the clock to add weapons and armor to vessels that had never been designed for war. Factory workers who had been making farming equipment started building missiles and guns instead. Dr. Ryan Foster led a team of scientists who were desperately searching for any advantage they could find. Ryan was young but brilliant, and he had been studying the alien transmission for days without sleep. His team included experts in physics, biology, and computer science, all working together to understand their enemy. What they discovered would change everything, though they did not know it yet. The breakthrough came during a routine training exercise. Lieutenant Alex Morgan was running combat simulations with a group of new pilots, teaching them how to fight in space battles. Alex had been a test pilot before becoming a trainer, and she knew how to push ships and pilots to their limits. During one exercise, a pilot named Danny Clark made a mistake that should have gotten him killed. Danny was trying to avoid enemy fire when his ship's computer failed. Instead of following standard procedures, he started flying purely on instinct, making turns and moves that the computer said were impossible. His ship twisted and spun through space in patterns that made no sense, but somehow he avoided every shot the training weapons fired at him. When the exercise ended, everyone was amazed that Danny was still alive. Alex studied the recordings of Danny's flight and realized something important. Human pilots could do things that alien computers might not expect. While other species probably flew their ships in logical, predictable patterns, humans could be creative and chaotic. This gave Ryan Foster an idea that would become humanity's secret weapon. Commander Beth Adams was working on a different kind of problem. Beth commanded intelligence operations for the human fleet, and she had been trying to contact other species that the Zephyrian Empire had conquered. Most of these aliens were probably dead or completely under Imperial control, but Beth hoped that some might have survived in hiding. Her patience paid off when she received a weak signal from the Korath system, which had been conquered by the Empire 50 years ago. The message was in broken human language, sent by a group of Korath warriors who had been fighting a secret war against their oppressors. The Korath were large, strong aliens who valued honor and courage above everything else. They had been forced to work in imperial mines, but some had escaped to the mountains of their home world. The Korath leader, a warrior named Groktar, told Beth that there were other species hiding throughout the empire. The Melodians were artists and musicians who had been scattered when their world was destroyed, but small groups still lived in the ruins of imperial cities. The crystalline Nexarians had been forced to use their mathematical abilities to build imperial weapons, but some had found ways to sabotage their work. Beth realized that humanity was not alone in its hatred of the Empire. If these hidden rebels could be organized and supplied with weapons, they might be able to help when the war began. She started planning secret missions to contact as many rebel groups as possible, hoping to build an underground network that could strike at the Empire. From within, Admiral Parker was coordinating all of these efforts while also preparing humanity's defenses. Lisa knew that the human fleet was completely outmatched by the aliens, but she had learned an important lesson from studying Earth's military history. Sometimes a smaller force could defeat a larger one by being smarter, faster, and more willing to take risks. The Admiral ordered her captains to forget everything they had learned about normal space combat. Human ships would not line up and exchange fire with the enemy like gentlemen. Instead, they would hit and run, attack from unexpected directions, and use every dirty trick they could think of. If the aliens expected humans to fight like civilized beings, they were about to be very disappointed. As the 30-day deadline approached, humanity transformed itself into a war machine. Children were evacuated from the most dangerous worlds, while their parents prepared to fight. Engineers worked to build new weapons and improve existing ones. Doctors stockpiled medical supplies and prepared emergency hospitals. Everyone knew that the coming battle would decide whether the human race had a future. Captain Jake Harrison returned to Earth with the Liberty and immediately volunteered for the most dangerous missions. Jake had seen the alien fleet with his own eyes, and he knew how powerful they were. But he also knew that humans had something the aliens did not expect: the willingness to do whatever it took to stay free. The countdown continued, and humanity prepared to face the storm. The 30 days passed like a nightmare that humanity could not wake up from. When the deadline arrived, the Zephyrian war fleet appeared at the edge of human space, exactly on schedule. Their ships materialized out of faster-than-light travel, in perfect formation, a sight that filled the void with alien metal and deadly purpose. At the center of the fleet was the Infinite Dominion, a massive vessel the size of a small moon that served as the flagship of Supreme War Commander Thexdale. Commander Thexdale stood on his bridge looking out at the primitive human settlements that dotted this region of space. The commander was tall and imposing, with 4 arms that ended in sharp claws and scales that gleamed under the ship's lights. He had conquered 47 star systems for the Empire, and he expected this to be just another easy victory. Humans were a young species that had barely learned to travel between stars. They would surrender quickly when they saw the true power of the Empire. The first target was Titan Station, humanity's outermost defense post. The station was built around one of Saturn's moons and served as an early warning system for Earth. Commander Scott Williams was in charge of defending the station with just 200 human ships against 5,000 Imperial vessels. Scott knew he could not win this battle, but he also knew that his job was to buy time for the rest of humanity to prepare. Captain Jake Harrison was among the defenders at Titan Station. His ship, the Liberty, had been fitted with the best weapons and armor that human engineers could build. Jake looked out at the approaching alien fleet and felt his heart pounding with fear and determination. He opened a communication channel that reached every ship in the human fleet and spoke the words that would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Jake said simply, "Come and take it." His voice was calm and steady, carrying no trace of the terror. that every human felt when they saw the size of the enemy fleet. The message was broadcast across all frequencies, reaching not only the human defenders but also the Zephyrian ships that were preparing to attack. Supreme Commander Thexdal heard those words and felt something he had never experienced before: confusion. The battle began when the Zephyrian fleet opened fire with weapons that could melt asteroids. Huge beams of energy cut through space toward the human ships, but something unexpected happened. The human pilots did not respond the way that alien computer systems predicted they would. Instead of following logical evasion patterns, the humans started flying in ways that made no sense. Lieutenant Alex Morgan was flying her fighter in wild spirals and sudden direction changes that the Zephyrian targeting computers could not track. Her movements looked random and chaotic, like she was having some kind of mechanical failure. But Alex was actually using the flight techniques that had been developed during training exercises, letting her instincts guide her ship instead of relying on computer calculations. Danny Clark had been promoted to captain after his training accident revealed the power of chaotic flying. Now he led a squadron of fighters that attacked the alien fleet using tactics that no military academy had ever taught. His ships dove through formations of enemy vessels, firing at random targets, and then disappearing before the aliens could respond. The Zephyrian computers kept trying to predict where the humans would go next, but there was no pattern to predict. Dr. Ryan Foster was watching the battle from his laboratory on Earth, studying how the human pilots were confusing the alien systems. Ryan had discovered something amazing about the way human brains worked compared to alien minds. Most species in the galaxy thought in logical, ordered ways that made their actions predictable. But humans could make sudden leaps of intuition and act on pure instinct, creating patterns that were impossible to calculate. While the main battle raged around Titan Station, Captain Amy Chen was leading a secret mission behind enemy lines. Amy commanded the scout ship Valiant, and her job was to rescue alien prisoners from a Zephyrian prison vessel. The mission was extremely dangerous, but Amy knew that any aliens who had survived Imperial captivity might be willing to help humanity fight their common enemy. Amy's ship slipped through the chaos of the battle and approached the prison ship, while the Zephyrians were distracted. The vessel was heavily guarded, but Amy used the same chaotic flying techniques that were working so well in the main battle. Her ship moved in unpredictable patterns that confused the prison ship's defenses, long enough for her to dock and board. Inside the prison ship, Amy found dozens of alien prisoners from species that the Empire had conquered. Most were broken and hopeless after years of captivity, but one group stood out. They were Melodians, a species of artists and musicians whose homeworld had been destroyed 50 years ago. Their leader was a being called Harmony Singer Zilthara, who had maintained hope even in the darkest circumstances. Zilthara told Amy that there were more Melodian survivors scattered throughout the Empire, hiding in ruins and abandoned settlements. The Melodians had a special ability to communicate across vast distances using harmonic frequencies that most species could not detect. If they could be organized, they might be able to coordinate resistance activities throughout Imperial territory. The rescue mission was a success, but the main battle was going badly for humanity. Despite their chaotic tactics, the human fleet was simply too outnumbered to hold Titan Station. Scott Williams made the difficult decision to retreat, but not before his ships had given the Zephyrians something to think about. For the first time in their Imperial history, the aliens had faced an enemy that they could not understand or predict. Supreme Commander Thexdal stared at the tactical displays on his bridge, trying to make sense of what had just happened. His fleet had won the battle, but the victory felt hollow. The human ships had fought in ways that violated every principle of military science that the Empire had developed over thousands of years. Their movements were chaotic and random, but somehow effective. The commander sent a report to Emperor Kethmos on the Imperial homeworld, describing the humans as tactical anomalies that required further study. Thexdal had expected the humans to surrender after seeing the power of the Imperial fleet, but instead, they had chosen to fight. Even worse, their chaotic nature made them much more dangerous than their primitive technology should have allowed. News of the Battle of Titan Station spread throughout human space. Something unexpected happened. Instead of being discouraged by the defeat, humans began to feel hope for the first time since the aliens arrived. They had faced the mighty Zephyrian Empire and had not been instantly crushed. Their chaotic nature, which many had seen as a weakness, was actually their greatest strength against an enemy that relied on order and predictability. The war had truly begun, and both sides knew that this conflict would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered countless worlds by overwhelming their enemies with superior force, but humanity was proving to be different. The humans would not surrender, and they would not fight by the rules that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. After the Battle of Titan Station, Admiral Lisa Parker knew that humanity could not win a traditional war against the Zephyrian Empire. The aliens had too many ships and too much firepower for humans to face them directly. Instead, Lisa developed a plan called Operation Wildfire that would use humanity's greatest strength, their unpredictable nature, to fight a guerrilla war across the galaxy. The plan was simple but dangerous. Small groups of human ships would attack Zephyrian forces wherever they could find them, then disappear before the aliens could respond. These hit-and-run attacks would force the Empire to spread their fleet across hundreds of systems, making them vulnerable to larger human strikes. The key was to never fight where the enemy expected and never stay in one place long enough to be trapped. Captain Danny Clark became the perfect example of this new type of warfare. Danny commanded a modified cargo ship called Freedom's Edge that had been converted into a warship by adding weapons and armor. His crew was made up of former miners, traders, and mechanics who knew how to improvise and adapt when things went wrong. They were not professional soldiers, but they understood how to survive in dangerous situations. Danny's first mission took him to the Kepler system, where Zephyrian forces were setting up a supply base. The alien commander expected any attack to come from the outer planets, where human ships would have the most room to maneuver. Instead, Danny brought his ship out of hyperspace right next to the system's sun, where the heat and radiation would hide his approach from alien sensors. The Freedom's Edge swept through the inner system like a comet, striking the alien supply ships, and then diving behind the sun before the Zephyrians could react. Danny's attack destroyed 3 months' worth of supplies and left the alien commander wondering how humans had managed to fly so close to a star without being burned to ash. The answer was that Danny's crew had modified their ship in ways that no alien engineer would have thought possible. While Danny and other captains carried out raids across Imperial space, a different kind of resistance was forming on worlds that the Zephyrians had already conquered. Maria Santos had been a teacher on the colony world of New Harmony before the aliens arrived. Now she was leading a network of civilian rebels who used their knowledge of human psychology to confuse and frustrate their occupiers. The Zephyrians were logical beings who expected conquered populations to either submit completely or rebel in predictable ways. They were not prepared for humans who smiled and nodded while secretly sabotaging everything they touched. Maria's people would give the aliens wrong directions, provide faulty information, and create small accidents that seemed like honest mistakes but added up to major problems. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been studying Zephyrian biology since the first alien transmission arrived, and she finally made a breakthrough that would change the course of the war. Elena discovered that the Zephyrian brain was highly evolved for logical thinking, but this evolution had come at a cost. The aliens had lost the ability to process random or irrational stimuli without experiencing severe stress. Elena's discovery led to the development of what humans called chaos weapons. These devices did not fire bullets or energy beams. Instead, they bombarded Zephyrian soldiers with random sounds, lights, and electromagnetic signals that their brains could not organize into logical patterns. Aliens exposed to these weapons would become confused and disoriented, sometimes to the point of complete paralysis. The effectiveness of chaos weapons was first demonstrated during a rescue mission led by Commander Beth Adams. Beth had been working with alien resistance groups throughout the Empire, and she had learned that a group of Melodian survivors was being held in a prison camp on the industrial world of Vega Prime. The camp was heavily guarded by Zephyrian soldiers who were considered elite troops. Beth's team approached the prison camp using stealth technology that made their ship nearly invisible. When they reached the perimeter, they activated the new chaos weapons instead of using traditional firearms. The Zephyrian guards immediately began stumbling around in confusion, unable to understand the random sensory input that was flooding their nervous systems. The humans were able to walk right past them and free the prisoners without firing a single shot. Among the rescued Melodians was harmony singer Zilthara, who had become a symbol of hope for survivors throughout the Empire. Zilthara possessed detailed knowledge of Zephyrian communication systems, including the location of the central hub that coordinated Imperial fleet movements across the galaxy. This information would prove crucial to humanity's eventual victory. The most daring raid of the guerrilla war was planned around Zilthara's intelligence. The Zephyrian communication hub was located on a heavily fortified moon in the heart of Imperial territory. The facility was protected by an entire fleet of warships and was considered completely impregnable. Admiral Parker knew that attacking it would be suicide, but she also knew that destroying the hub might cripple Imperial coordination for months. Commander Beth Adams volunteered to lead the mission, knowing that she probably would not survive. Her strike force included the best human pilots and a group of Melodian volunteers who wanted revenge for their destroyed home world. The plan was to use chaos weapons to confuse the defenders while a small team infiltrated the communication hub and planted explosives. The mission launched in complete secrecy, with Beth's ships using every stealth technique that human engineers had developed. They approached the Imperial stronghold by hiding among a group of asteroids, moving slowly and carefully to avoid detection. When they were finally spotted, the Zephyrian defenders expected a normal attack that they could easily repel. Instead, Beth's ships began transmitting chaos signals on every frequency they could access. The random electromagnetic noise overwhelmed Zephyrian communication systems and made their targeting computers useless. While the alien fleet struggled to coordinate their response, human infiltration teams used the confusion to board the communication hub. The battle inside the facility was fierce but brief. Zephyrian soldiers who had been trained to fight logical enemies found themselves facing humans who seemed to appear and disappear at random. The chaos weapons made it impossible for the aliens to think clearly, while the humans thrived in the confusion and disorder. Beth Adams led the final assault on the hub's central control room, fighting her way through layers of security that had never been breached before. She knew that the mission would only succeed if the communication system was completely destroyed, not just damaged. As alarms blared throughout the facility, Beth made the ultimate sacrifice. Beth activated all of the explosives at once, knowing that she was too close to the blast zone to escape. Her final transmission reached Admiral Parker on Earth, carrying a simple message that would inspire resistance fighters across the galaxy. Beth said that humanity would never stop fighting for freedom, no matter what the cost might be. The destruction of the communication hub sent shockwaves throughout the Zephyrian Empire. For the first time in their history, Imperial forces lost contact with Central Command. Fleet movements became uncoordinated, supply lines were disrupted and conquered. Worlds began to see hope for liberation. Most importantly, other alien species realized that the mighty empire could be defeated. On dozens of worlds that had been under imperial rule for centuries, rebellions began to break out. The Korath warriors emerged from their mountain hideouts to attack Zephyrian garrison forces. Melodian survivors used their harmonic abilities to coordinate uprisings across multiple systems. Even the crystalline Nexarians, who had been forced to build imperial weapons, began sabotaging their own work. The galaxy was waking up from a long nightmare, and humanity had shown the way. The chaotic nature that made humans seem inferior to the orderly Zephyrians was actually the key to bringing down the Empire. As news of the successful raid spread, Admiral Parker began planning the next phase of the war. The guerrilla campaign had been successful, but now it was time to take the fight directly to the enemy. The destruction of the communication hub had consequences that reached far beyond what Admiral Lisa Parker had hoped for. Across the galaxy, alien species that had been crushed under Zephyrian rule for generations suddenly found the courage to fight back. The Empire's perfect order began to crumble as rebellion broke out on hundreds of worlds simultaneously. What had started as humanity's desperate fight for survival was becoming the largest uprising in galactic history. General Patricia Hayes had been promoted to replace Admiral Parker after Lisa died defending the Mars orbital stations from a Zephyrian assault. Patricia was younger than Lisa, but just as determined to see humanity free. Her first task was to coordinate with the growing alliance of rebel species that were reaching out to human forces. The job was complicated because each alien race had completely different ways of thinking and fighting. The Korath were powerful warriors who valued honor above everything else. Their leader, War Chief Groktar, commanded thousands of fighters, who had been hiding in mountain caves and underground tunnels for 50 years. The Korath preferred direct combat with heavy weapons, charging straight at their enemies while roaring battle cries that could be heard across entire battlefields. The Melodians were almost the opposite of the Korath, led by harmony singer Zilthara. They were artists and musicians who used sound and rhythm as weapons. Melodian technology was based on harmonic frequencies that could shatter metal, disrupt electronics, or carry messages across vast distances. They fought like conductors leading an orchestra, coordinating attacks with musical precision. The crystalline Nexarians were living computers who thought in mathematical equations and probability calculations. Their bodies were made of a crystal-like substance that could change shape and conduct electricity. The Nexarians had been forced to design weapons for the Empire, but they had secretly built weaknesses into every system they created. Now they were ready to exploit those flaws. Dozens of other species joined the growing rebellion, each bringing their own unique abilities and hatred for the Empire. The spider-like arachnoids were master engineers who could build anything from salvaged materials. The gaseous cloudkin could infiltrate enemy ships by flowing through ventilation systems. The rock-based stonemen were nearly indestructible and could survive in the vacuum of space without protection. General Hayes faced the challenging task of turning this diverse collection of rebels into an effective fighting force. Each species had different needs, different communication methods, and different ideas about military strategy. What united them was their shared desire to destroy the Zephyrian Empire, but that might not be enough to win a war against such a powerful enemy. The breakthrough came when Dr. Ryan Foster developed new technology that would change space combat forever. Ryan had been studying the way human brains created chaotic thought patterns, and he realized that this randomness could be used to power faster-than-light travel. Traditional hyperspace drives followed predictable mathematical formulas, but a chaos-based system would be impossible to track or intercept. Captain Tony Rivera volunteered to test the first quantum chaos drive, even though the prototype might tear his ship apart or scatter his atoms across the galaxy. Tony was a veteran pilot who had survived dozens of raids against Imperial forces, and he understood the importance of taking risks to win the war. His ship, the Wild Card, was modified to house the experimental drive system. The first test was both terrifying and amazing. Tony's ship disappeared from normal space and then reappeared in a completely different star system, hundreds of light years away. The journey had taken only seconds, but the Chaos Drive had brought him out of hyperspace in a location that no computer could have predicted. Even Tony did not know where he was going until he arrived. More Chaos drives were built and installed on the fastest human ships, creating a fleet that could strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Imperial forces found themselves under attack in systems they thought were perfectly safe, while rebel fleets disappeared before Zephyrian reinforcements could arrive. The Empire's rigid military doctrine had no answer for enemies who could appear and vanish at random. While the rebellion grew stronger, Emperor Kethmos was growing desperate on the Imperial homeworld. The Emperor was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, having ruled the Empire for over 300 years. He had built his power on the promise that Imperial forces were invincible, but now that promise was being shattered by a species that had barely learned to fly between stars. The Emperor decided to deploy the Empire's ultimate weapon, a moon-sized vessel called the Planet Killer. This massive ship could destroy entire worlds with a single shot from its main cannon, turning planets into asteroid fields in a matter of minutes. The Planet Killer had been used only twice in Imperial history, both times to make examples of species that refused to surrender. Emperor Kethmos took personal command of the Planet Killer and assembled the largest fleet in Imperial history to escort it. Over 1 million ships gathered around the terrible weapon, creating an armada that stretched across entire star systems. The Emperor's plan was simple. He would destroy Earth and every human colony, then use the recordings of humanity's annihilation to terrorize other rebel species back into submission. News of the approaching superweapon reached the Rebel Alliance through Melodian communication networks that spanned the galaxy. General Hayes called an emergency meeting of all rebel leaders, knowing that this might be their last chance to coordinate a defense. The meeting took place on a hidden asteroid base where representatives from 30 species gathered to plan their response. The diversity of the Rebel Alliance was both its greatest strength and its biggest weakness. Each species wanted to fight the Planet Killer in their own way, using tactics that made sense to their particular form of intelligence. The Korath wanted to charge straight at the enemy in a massive frontal assault. The Melodians suggested using harmonic weapons to disrupt the superweapon systems. The Nexarians calculated that their chances of victory were less than 3%. President Kevin Stone, who had traveled from Earth to attend the meeting, stood before the assembled aliens and spoke words that would become famous throughout the galaxy. He said that this battle would decide whether freedom or tyranny ruled among the stars. Humans had shown that the Empire could be defeated, but only by working together could they hope to destroy something as powerful as the Planet Killer. The plan that emerged from the meeting was as chaotic as humanity itself. Instead of following a single strategy, the Rebel Alliance would attack from every direction at once, using every weapon and tactic they possessed. The goal was not to fight the Imperial fleet in an organized battle, but to create so much confusion that the Planet Killer could not target Earth effectively. Captain Tony Rivera was given the most dangerous mission of all. His ship, equipped with the most advanced Chaos drive ever built, would attempt to penetrate the Planet Killer's defenses and destroy it from within. The mission was almost certainly suicide, but Tony accepted it without hesitation. He knew that if the superweapon succeeded in destroying Earth, the rebellion would collapse and the galaxy would remain enslaved forever. As the Imperial Armada approached the solar system, rebel fleets began gathering from across the galaxy. Ships designed by dozens of different species assembled in formations that had never been attempted before. Korath war barges flew alongside delicate Melodian harmony ships, while Nexarian computational vessels coordinated with human chaos drive. Fighters. The largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin. The final confrontation would take place in humanity's home system, where the species that had started the rebellion would make their last stand. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, surrounded by the combined fleets of free peoples who had chosen to risk everything for the chance to remain free. The planet killer and its escorts were only hours away, and soon the galaxy would learn whether courage and chaos could triumph over overwhelming force. The Imperial Armada arrived at the edge of Earth's solar system like a dark storm cloud that blocked out the stars. Emperor Kethmos stood on the bridge of the planet killer, looking out at the small blue world that had caused him so much trouble. The Emperor expected to find a cowering planet begging for mercy, but instead he saw the largest rebel fleet ever assembled. Over 200,000 ships from dozens of species had gathered to defend humanity's home world. General Patricia Hayes coordinated the defense from her flagship, the New Liberty, which orbited Earth alongside vessels from across the galaxy. Patricia had never imagined that she would command such a diverse fleet, with ships that looked like nothing she had ever seen before. Korath war barges bristled with massive guns, while delicate Melodian harmony ships pulsed with musical energy. Nexarian computational vessels calculated firing solutions while human chaos drive fighters prepared for their unpredictable attacks. The battle began when Emperor Kethmos ordered the planet killer to target Earth with its main weapon. The massive cannon began charging with enough energy to crack a planet in half, its power levels climbing toward the point where it could fire. But Captain Tony Rivera was ready for this moment. His ship, the Wild Card, materialized right next to the superweapon using its chaos drive, appearing in a location that no Imperial sensor had detected. Tony's ship was tiny compared to the planet killer, like a mosquito attacking a giant, but it carried the most destructive cargo in human history. His crew had filled the Wild Card with every explosive device they could find, turning their ship into a flying bomb that could theoretically damage even something as massive as the superweapon. The plan was simple, but deadly. Crash into the planet killer's main cannon and detonate everything at once. The Wild Card dove toward its target while Imperial fighters tried desperately to intercept it. Tony flew his ship in the chaotic patterns. That had become humanity's signature, making random turns and impossible maneuvers that confused the alien targeting computers. His crew fired chaos weapons at the pursuing fighters, sending bursts of random electromagnetic noise that made the Zephyrian pilots lose control of their ships. Meanwhile, the main battle raged across the entire solar system. Commander Julie Green led the defense of Mars with a fleet of converted mining ships and orbital platforms. Julie had grown up in the asteroid belt and knew how to fight in the complicated environment of a planetary system. Her forces used the gravity of planets and moons to slingshot around enemy formations, appearing where the aliens least expected them. Captain Sam Phillips commanded a mixed squadron of human and alien fighters that attacked the Imperial flagship directly. Sam's ships included arachnoid engineers who could repair damage instantly, cloudkin pilots who could flow through enemy formations, and stonemen warriors who could survive direct hits from Imperial weapons. The diversity of the rebel fleet made it impossible for Zephyrian commanders to predict what would happen next. Dr. Ryan Foster activated his ultimate weapon from a secret laboratory on Earth's moon. Ryan had spent months perfecting a chaos transmission that could broadcast pure human creativity and randomness across the Imperial fleet's communication network. The transmission included music, poetry, abstract art, and random thoughts from thousands of human volunteers. To human minds, it was beautiful and inspiring. To Zephyrian brains, it was complete madness. The chaos transmission spread through the Imperial fleet like a virus, overwhelming alien communication systems with patterns that made no logical sense. Zephyrian commanders began receiving orders that contradicted each other, sensor readings that showed impossible things, and tactical data that seemed to have been generated by insane computers. The Empire's greatest strength, their unified command structure, became their fatal weakness when flooded with chaotic information. Supreme War Commander Thexdal watched his fleet falling apart from the bridge of the Infinite Dominion. Ships were firing on their own allies, following random courses, and ignoring direct orders from their commanders. The chaos transmission had turned the Imperial Navy into a collection of confused individuals who could not work together. Thexdal, realized that the humans had found a way to weaponize their own unpredictable nature. Emperor Kethmos was suffering the worst effects of the chaos transmission. The ancient ruler's highly evolved brain could not process the random inputs without experiencing severe psychological trauma. The emperor began giving contradictory orders, demanding that his fleet attack and retreat at the same time. In his confusion, he ordered the planet killer to target his own ships, believing that they had been taken over by rebel forces. Tony Rivera reached the planet killer's main cannon just as it was preparing to fire. The massive weapon was so large that Tony's ship looked like a grain of sand next to a mountain. But the chaos drive had brought him to exactly the right position. Tony opened a communication channel to General Hayes and spoke his final words, telling her that humanity would never surrender to tyrants. The wild card crashed into the planet killer's cannon and exploded with the force of a small star. The chain reaction spread throughout the superweapon's power systems, causing secondary explosions that tore the massive vessel apart from the inside. Tony's sacrifice destroyed the Empire's ultimate weapon and dealt a psychological blow from which the Zephyrians would never recover. The destruction of the planet killer marked the turning point of the battle. Imperial forces that had been struggling with the chaos transmission now faced the reality that their most powerful weapon had been destroyed by a single human ship. Morale collapsed throughout the fleet as alien soldiers realized that their empire was not invincible after all. Supreme War Commander Thex Dale was one of the few Zephyrians who had begun to understand human tactics during the Long War. While his emperor raved and gave insane orders, Thexdal quietly took control of the Imperial fleet. The commander had come to respect human courage and creativity, even though he was supposed to destroy them. He made a decision that would shock both sides of the conflict. Thexdal contacted General Hayes directly, bypassing his own chain of command to arrange a meeting between enemy leaders. The Zephyrian commander told Patricia that he was prepared to discuss terms for the Empire's surrender, something that had never happened in Imperial history. Emperor Kethmos was no longer fit to command, and the war had shown that the Empire's rigid system could not defeat the chaos of free peoples. The battle for Earth ended not with a final charge or dramatic explosion, but with representatives from both sides meeting on a neutral station to discuss peace terms. The negotiations took weeks, but eventually resulted in the Galactic Freedom Accords that dismantled the Zephyrian Empire and established a new confederation based on diversity and freedom rather than uniformity and oppression. Years later, Admiral Jake Harrison stood in the same observation deck where he had first received the alien ultimatum that started the war. The solar system was now patrolled by ships from hundreds of free worlds, representing species that had learned to work together despite their differences. Earth served as the capital of the Galactic Federation of Free Worlds, a position that humanity had never sought but had earned through sacrifice and courage. Human chaos theory was taught in schools across the galaxy as both a military doctrine and a philosophy of creative problem-solving. The anniversary of the Battle for Earth became Liberation Day, celebrated by countless species who had learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon against tyranny was simply refusing to act as tyrants expected. Dr. Elena Rodriguez established the Institute for Cognitive Diversity, where different species studied how their varied thought patterns could solve problems that no single race could tackle alone. The day that humanity had stood alone against the Galactic Empire had become the day that the galaxy learned to stand together. The chaos that had once made humans seem inferior to the orderly Zephyrians was now recognized as one of the universe's greatest treasures, the spark of unpredictability that kept freedom alive among the stars. The war was over, but the legacy of human chaos would continue to inspire free peoples for generations to come.